Morning, good afternoon, everyone. Excited to be here with you today. I know we still have some folks trickling in, but we'll go ahead and get this started. We're really excited to go through the content we have with you today. We'll tell you a little bit more about what we're going to do, but first, let me just let you know we are going to be sending a recording of this webinar and the slides and the resources, some of the resources we're going to mention along the way. So you will be getting those. We are going to stop several times for questions. If you look at your Zoom controls panel, you're going to see a Q&A button there. Please, if you have questions, drop them in. We will stop at a couple different times, like I mentioned, and answer questions. And we also have some other members of our teams in the background who will be there ready to help answer questions. So please speak up. Our agenda for today, we're going to cover a few topics that we feel are really, really valuable for growing businesses, helping your teams be successful. So we'll talk about talent acquisition. This has been a key topic for several years for growing businesses. We hear a lot about this from our clients. So a couple ways to make sure you get the right people on your team. We'll talk through some HR compliance challenges that go along with that, things to be aware of as your company grows, especially some newer issues I think that have come to the forefront for employers. We'll also talk about 4 ways to retain your employees as you're growing and scaling, and we have some great success stories as we go along. I am Colby Davis, really excited to be here with you. I am the president of Obsidian HR. We're based out of Colorado. We focus on small, medium-sized businesses, partnering with them to handle their HR, payroll, benefits, workers' comp, essentially allow them to focus on growing their business. I've been in the industry about 5 years and did a lot of other things before joining the industry, but this is my true love. I love what I do and super blessed to be part of this organization. I want to introduce Becky Woods. Becky Woods is the HR director at Advanced Staff HR. Advanced Staff is our sister company, and so we're co-hosting this. Advanced Staff is based out of Nevada, out of Las Vegas. They have business for 31 years. Becky has been working in HR for 25 years and particularly loves employment regulation, payroll benefits, and employee acquisition. She has an incredible background and a lot of wisdom that she's going to be able to share with all of us today. And one of the great things about Becky and our teams in general is that we work with lots of different companies, different industries, different sizes, and it means that folks like Becky really have a really well-rounded background. So Becky, welcome. Thank you for joining us today and sharing some of your wisdom and experience.
All right.
So let's jump into it. One of the challenges that business owners face, Becky, is we need top talent, right? We all need top talent in our organizations to expand and grow, but it's tough to attract that top talent without a big brand power or huge budgets. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what business leaders can do to get that top talent.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Colby, for the introduction and for this topic. It's a bit of a surprise to me and maybe to some of you as well, how much competition there is for top talent and for good people right now. I was just looking at the unemployment rate. As everybody may be aware, we're in what's called nominal unemployment. So we're running about 3.7% nationally. And that means that between 3 and 5% is really nominal or normal unemployment. So we're not in a period of shortage of jobs. We're in a period of shortage of workers. And who would have known after COVID? So anyway, this puts us all in this position to have to look at what do we do to compete for those scarce resources. There are many different talent acquisition strategies, and among them are 2 concepts. One is build or buy. And buying is just what it sounds like. You go out, you compete against the market, you raise your wages, you may raise your employees' wages, but you're on the path to buying outside staff. The problem with that, of course, is you are competing for the same rare resources, and buying it certainly is a strategy, but it does drive up your cost. It can reduce your profitability and put you in the position to have to defend your decision to pay outside staff more than what you're paying your current staff. So as you're gearing up, you need to be really careful of that. A second option is to build your own team. And building your own team is really creating your own internal vocational training. So instead of saying, hey, you know what, we're going to go buy someone else's training and experience from another entity, we're going to build that experience ourselves. So it seems like a lot, because it is a lot of work to put together your own internal vocational training. I mean, you can get every type of HR training and general training on the market, very easy to do, but your own personal vocational training is more difficult to do. One of the strategies behind doing that is creating what we would call a program of like a boot camp. So you start every employee in a boot camp, you put them through a training for accounting, for your frontline widget making, whatever you do on the front line of what you do, other support areas. So you run them through all your support and your vocational areas to teach and train them on what to do. Doing that takes time and effort, and one of the strategies behind that is to establish roving trainers. So internally, setting up people someone from your accounting department who does the accounting training, someone from your front line of your primary departments serving as roving trainers. You don't have to hire a huge staff of trainers, but it gives you this opportunity to utilize your internal people with their experience, their knowledge, and then to build that team the way that you want the team to be built. And roving trainers are a solution. Of course, it works well to have somebody who can coordinate your roving trainers and to coordinate building this vocational training, but it probably is less expensive than going out and buying a whole outside staff. Doesn't mean that you can't combine those two possibilities, and sometimes you're buying some outside staff and you're building some, but building is a longer term proposition that you set out to do, and you set goals probably more like in 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year increments, so that you're looking out to the future, so your build program gets bigger and bigger as you build. In order to support in a build program, one of the primary strategies that we have employed with our clients is to set up and manage an internal referral program. Because if you are seeking outside employees, whether they're coming through your current employees or through advertising or from LinkedIn or any other source, you want to have a program that rewards your internal people for referring people that they believe would be a good fit and good members of your team. Some of the programs that we've worked with our clients include a very generous internal referral. So it's competitive, and it sets up a level of interest with your internal employees so that they actually want to engage in it. Some of those programs could be, for instance, $1,000 per person that they refer, a $2,000 per person for harder to fill positions, and perhaps a $500 referral for those that are not as difficult to refer and to fill, but you have had some trouble filling them. Internal referral programs really should be time-based, because of course, if you set up a situation where your internal employees get a bonus or referral and they turn over the employees right away, or you turn over the employees right away, or they were not a fit, and your internal folks are just trying to fill positions, that defeats the purpose for an internal referral program. So most of the programs that I've worked with and set up in the past with our clients are time-based. So they be a referral, for instance, a $1,200 referral would be paid out over a 12-month period of time, maybe a down payment of about 40%, and then additional payments over the remaining 12-month period, during which time both parties need to be actively and fully employed by the company. You can also vary this referral program and depend upon the need. So if you have very hard to fill positions, as I mentioned, you may have a higher referral dollar amount, and it may be stretched over a shorter period of time, or you may have a lower one depending upon your need. Also, you can set time-based programs. So this referral program runs for 5 months, and the referral program for these positions runs for 2 months. So anything is possible, and you can make sure that you are running a program that is financially responsible for the company and gets your employees engaged and bringing the appropriate people into the company. The third strategy is using non-traditional sources of employment. One of the non-traditional sources is seniors. You know, a lot of baby boomers are retiring now, and I've seen many companies reach out to seniors and people who are near retirement and looking at them as individuals who could fill their positions. There are also self-help programs, people who are challenged populations, including populations from people who have committed crimes. And I know everyone's shocked at that. You know, how could I possibly bring on somebody who has some sort of a criminal background? And the reality is that it's a large population. There are a lot of people out there, and there are jobs that are a fit for people like that. And by the way, all the states are very interested. You know, states really control their prison population, and they get involved in justice programs and help programs for people who are coming out of the prison system. Also, veterans organizations, always very, very helpful and very happy to help provide opportunities for people. And then finally, the work opportunity tax credits. There's a program that has been around for a long, long time, decades, in fact, and it's run by the federal government, and you can target, or they target certain populations, people who have been on SNAP or TAMP, which are aid to dependent or to needy families, and SNAP and other veterans organizations, also ex-felons and other people who may have a harder time getting employed. The thing about the work opportunity tax credit is that it is very likely during periods of low unemployment, like what we have right now, that there are very few people who have been unemployed long enough to qualify for the work opportunity tax credit. Having said that, it's still a very unique program and one that can be geared up for your company. And if you do gear it up, we have information about how to gear it up and how to get one started. But if you do gear one up, when you hit periods of higher unemployment, you're already set up and ready to go to capture some of those populations. Any other thoughts, Colby, about the 3 talent acquisition strategies?
Yeah, I'll just say a hearty amen to all of them. You know, I'll just add, setting up that training program, even if you're using an outside recruiter, it's still really worthwhile to start building those because your company is going to benefit. Also, there's some great tools out there. If you're hiring just a handful of people a year, you can probably get by with you know, a subscription to a Indeed or a ZipRecruiter, a tool like that. If you're going to be hiring a lot of people and you want to be doing it yourself, there's also some great technology applicant tracking systems that can help and make that more manageable. But yeah, great wisdom, Becky. Another catch-22 for business leaders. You know, it's tough to grow without great people, but finding them can be tough, especially in the early stages of expansion. So thoughts on how to make sure you get the right people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, we used to say if during periods of low unemployment, you know, if somebody is alive and breathing, they're going to be hired by a company. And you know, I've seen this time and time again. The business cycles every 10 years, and you have this very low unemployment. The drawback with approaching employment that way is that you end up bringing the wrong people on your team to begin with. And while it takes patience and perseverance to bring the right people, it really is the right strategy for most companies. One of the things that we work with are pattern interviews with purpose. So a pattern interview, it's not just finding out exactly where they worked, how long they worked, what they did, but looking at how they reacted under pressure, asking them harder questions, asking them questions that have a purpose. What is your how would you rate your own productivity, and how does that compare to other people, and how will your manager that I will talk to rate you for productivity? So asking questions, using a pattern interview with a purpose is really important. Also, assessing attributes quickly. It is true that in periods of low employment like now, it is sometimes difficult to get somebody on the phone to even talk to, or in a video call to even talk to. So you want to have a pattern interview with purpose. And so when you go back and look at different candidates, that you can quickly assess what their attributes are. Also, red flag management. A lot of times, again, when we're in periods of low unemployment, we're saying, okay, if somebody fogs a mirror, let's get them hired. There are so many different red flags, and you've heard it before, and it's probably very true that you hire people for attitude, not necessarily for all the skills that they have. It's always interesting, though, to see how long companies will hold out trying to make an exact job match. Well, this person doesn't have this experience, they don't have that experience. What you're looking for really is attitude and their skills and abilities for the future. Red flag management is looking at, do they have those skills and abilities? And then what do you do as far as finding red flags is check references. Again, it's a hard thing to do. It takes extra time for you to do that. You have to have patience to do it, and you have to not give up on it. But that helps you look at what the prior performance of a person was. So, and it is very true that prior performance predicts future performance. When you are selecting employees, then one strategy is to look at top performers. Don't give in to, okay, I think this will fill the slot at this point. It is a long-term proposition. You owe it to an employee once you make a job offer, have made that decision, you owe it to them to have selected them properly, because you are in the business of employing people, not rendering them unemployed. So if you select the wrong people, ultimately they won't be employed because they won't fit your process or fit your company. There are some different methods to do that, and selecting top performers is really important if you're going to grow and scale your company. Colby, any thoughts or any questions related to that?
Yeah, I really love this. It is a challenge, the interview process, and I've loved for our company, our team, using top grading as a methodology for hiring. For anyone who hasn't heard of top grading, they have a book out, actually, WHO. It's a fantastic read, really quick, short read, but they have a whole methodology for how you should hire, and it really works for any industry. Becky, I'd love to hear, you and I were talking about this just the other day. Can you share how that top grading methodology brings some structure to the interview process?
Yeah. So top grading is really, you start out with a pattern interview that identifies various traits that you're looking for. And it doesn't take long, but it's one of those things you sit down with people, or over video or over the phone normally, and you go through these particular attributes that you're looking for, and look for answers that are associated with those attributes. Once you do that, what you're doing is looking at, and sometimes it feels kind of odd to say this, but A players, B players, and C players. And A players are people that really match up with the attributes that you're looking for. And in a very short interview, they should be able to show those attributes. If it takes a person a very, very long time to check it, to give you feedback on, a challenging situation that they dealt with and how they dealt with it, that's a sign to you that if they simply can't think of anything, that's a way to assess their attributes. So you're really looking for A players, and everyone wants A players, of course, all of us do. But at the very least, you don't want to allow your system to bring on people who will just fill those slots. And again, not to categorize everybody, but C players, a lot of times that are just filling slots or rolling through a lot of different jobs. That's who they are. That's where they will stay. So you're looking for A players and possible Bs who could possibly be developed into A players.
That's great. I heard someone say once, I think it was in a top grading training, honestly, if it's not an enthusiastic yes on someone you're considering hiring, then it's a no. And that wisdom of being slow to hire, I think it's really is valuable because, like you said, it's not fair for them, and the cost for the company is pretty high as well. Let's turn now. I don't think we've had any questions come in, which, Becky, I think that just means you're nailing it. And but if there's any questions from our audience, please go ahead and again use the Q&A button, put them in the Q&A section, and we can get to them. There are a couple questions that come in for chat. See, one person says checking references is a challenge in that the references you're getting are clearly strong supporters of the candidate. Any tips on how to get the true work style of a potential candidate when speaking with a fan of the candidate? Becky?
Yeah, I love that. In fact, I just did that a couple of days ago. What I do is I construct and have worked with our clients to construct a list of questions for the person giving the feedback. And those questions are not, they're almost structured like an interview by itself. So it's like you're interviewing that person as well. And I will ask questions like, what is did this person have any sort of or not disciplinary, but performance issues or issues that you thought they could address or could be addressed positively in the workplace? Were there development areas that you believe could have been further developed? So the questions are not, they're hard questions, but I see that people tend to answer them. And sometimes they answer them better if you send them via email or via some sort of a mechanism for them to sit down and think about it, because they're responding via email. So they're not just saying to you, yep, she's great, she's wonderful, she'll make all your wildest dreams come true. So the putting something on paper and asking a little bit harder question, one of the questions that I always suggest that our clients ask, and I use frequently myself, is if you were starting a new company and you had just the funds to hire only 3 people, would this person be one of those 3 people? And if so, why? And if not, why not? And I get some of the most insightful answers to that, even from fans of those individuals who are clearly in the court of this person. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been provided. But I've gotten some really good feedback from that. So you structure that, you structure your interview, or you structure it like an interview when you're dealing with references, and it can be very helpful.
That's great. I love the idea of bringing structure even to the reference check to make sure. And again, bringing that structure allows you to better compare candidates, whether that's in interviewing the candidate or interviewing references. I'll say one thing I do and has changed the value of reference checks for me is I don't let the candidate determine who they're going to send me as a reference check. As I learn about their background, I ask questions like, hey, what would your boss from this previous role, how would they describe you at the time? I know who their bosses are. And at the end, I say, hey, I'd love to talk with, your manager from this previous role and that previous role and a coworker from here. And it really allows, again, me to be the one determining who I want to talk to. And you'll see that some people will say, oh, well, I've lost contact with that boss, or frankly, they'll go to extreme lengths if they didn't perform well in that role to not let you talk to that boss. That person has died, that person has moved on, I've lost contact. If you're getting a lot of answers like that, occasionally it can be okay, but a lot of avoidance, it could be a red flag that that person maybe hasn't performed as well in the past as they would like you to think that they have. And again, listen, no one is going to be perfect, but you want to at least know the person's strengths and weaknesses fully before you decide to bring them on. All right, thank you for that question. That was a really good question. Let's keep moving, Becky. We have a lot to cover. Another catch-22, businesses have limited resources to devote to compliance, and I think we all know compliance law feels like it's getting more and more complex. But as your business grows, it is likely new laws and regulations are going to apply, which is one more challenge to growth. So what do you recommend?
Well, it's no mystery. The 50 states are legislating like 50 little federal governments. And not only that, cities and counties are legislating employment law. It's astounding, actually. So you have that additional challenge, as Colby said. You're not, there used to be, I remember we used to put together a chart that had like 10 major employment laws that you had to comply with. Now it's depends on the city, the state, the location. It's absolutely astounding. So some of these things that you will be dealing with as you try to grow and scale your company are laws that directly impact what you're doing in terms of growing and bringing new employees. So one of those things is wage transparency laws. And if you haven't heard of them, you certainly will soon. For those of you who live and work in Colorado, Colorado had one of the most stringent wage transparency laws that was passed a couple of years ago that basically says you have to publish the wage ranges. And even if an employee from anywhere, from Hawaii or Arkansas or anywhere else applies, you're still subject to this wage transparency law. So wage transparency can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing because your internal people see it. You've got your competitors will see it. Every person who is not qualified may see it and think, hey, I'd like to have a $55,000 salary, and they're not in the range for that type of salary, or even applying for a position that they're qualified for. So wage transparency laws create this wage and compensation challenge that really we haven't seen before, and more of them are being passed. And just as a note on that, the reason they're being passed is because of the idea that wage parity between men and women has lagged. So they passed those laws in order to bring wage parity between men and women. So it may be a good strategy and it may not. We'll have to see as it develops. But many states already have wage transparency laws. Also local control of wages. So now you see cities. The city of Seattle was one of the first. Minimum wage in Seattle now is $18.59 an hour. And many other cities, the city of Portland has its own minimum wage. St. Paul, Minnesota, Minneapolis, Minnesota, New York, the 6 boroughs have different minimum wage levels and different salary levels for salaried employees. So local control of wages is something that we haven't seen before. So when you go into a different area, if you're not just in Colorado or Nevada or Utah, you may see the need to have local wages that are higher in a different location, which doesn't feel quite right to your home team. Also, there's this wage inflation hangover from 21 to 22. Again, who knew that after the massive unemployment we had in 2020 and the first part of 2021, that wages would inflate so dramatically right after that? That is one of those things that we're dealing with now, although there's been a little bit of just a backing off of wage inflation, but it's still running pretty high. And part of the reason, of course, is the last bullet on here is inflation impacts, because employers and employees are all trying to figure out how to pay for everything, how to pay for their groceries, how to pay for their gas, how to pay for their homeowners insurance that just tripled. So there are so many different things that are impacting that. And then also the last one is working from home wage implications. There are people who, which kind of sometimes brings it the other direction. Some people working from home are more than happy to look at wages a little bit differently because they're saving commuting time, they're saving time on other things that they would have otherwise paid for. And so you get this kind of a flip-flop opportunity to see some wages actually go a little bit the other direction. But again, now you have people work in the office, people work from home, and you have wage implications because they're not all the same. Colby, any thoughts on those?
Yeah, really good points. Really good points, Becky. You mentioned that wage inflation. Colorado was actually one of the top states, so we definitely felt that here in Colorado. I'm curious, any tips on striking the right balance in rewarding employees, but also staying within the company budget and resources as you're figuring out wages?
Well, my primary tip is to lay out a very, very simple wage and salary program. It doesn't, you don't need a compensation analyst to do this. You know, despite the fact that big companies get in and hire big comp analysts, what you need to do is feel what the market is showing you right now. So if you have 5 different positions and you in the same position, and you've got a range of people who are willing to work in that position, you set a salary range and then you try to keep people within that range. So you may have outliers, you know, somebody who, for whatever reason, has been with the company longer, has a higher wage than others in that particular salary band. But be very careful about allowing that particular person's wage to inflate further. In other words, look at, it's called redlining. So you redline that wage, and then you look for other ways to incentivize that individual in their position because they have redlined. They are beyond the top of the salary range. By the same token, look at the bottom of the salary range, and don't make it too wide. So if you make it too wide, then you are dealing with factors that are really difficult to control. But keep it relatively narrow. Don't have people who are below your stated salary range, and try to keep everybody at least toward the middle of the range. That's nothing new. That's old school comp analysis, but you don't need a compensation analyst to do that for you. So I think that's how you try to keep wages as steady as possible. The other thing, as I'd mentioned before, is when you go to the outside and you're recruiting, you look at that build or buy philosophy. If you're buying, look at what you're buying and what it's costing you to buy, because that one of the strategies that we've employed with a couple of clients is to recognizing that when they go out to buy, because they don't want to build themselves, that before they even start, they look at their inside wages and make general adjustments upward for their inside people before the inside people start to see the advertisements out there with much higher wage range than what they're making. So it's a preventive strategy, and it can be very effective. In one company, in fact, they took their bonus programs, turned bonus into base salary. You know, it's a bird in hand. A lot of people like bonuses, but a lot of people don't, because they'd rather have the bird in hand and have their you know, day-to-day wage being paid. So they converted everything to base salary, and before they started out looking for this large group of additional people, because they knew already that the wages were going to be higher, and they were successful. They ended up basically raising everyone's wages, but not really raising their costs, because the costs were very likely to occur in the bonus program. Now, having said that, because they actually did very well and the company was performing very well, they still made the choice to pay bonuses, just not as high. And for the next couple of years, they were still assessing and offering bonus payments, but their wage inflation was not nearly as much as it would have been.
Right. Good question just came in. Says I'm having trouble trying to figure out the industry standard. Just looking at Indeed doesn't take a lot into account what resources are out there to help with that. So as you're trying to figure out what to pay people based on the market, the industry, anything you'd point folks to help them figure out what makes sense.
Well, first of all, I point to the free resources like BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, because BLS does an annual, and that's federal government. They don't necessarily do all positions, and some of their positions are so old-fashioned that it's actually quite shocking, because the BLS reports go way back to way back in the 50s and even before. But the titles, if you can get job titles that are relatively close and job responsibilities relatively close to those titles in the Bureau of Labor Statistics information, you can get some pretty good information. And generally that information is not inflated. If you go to salaries.com and some of those others, the information is generally inflated by 15%, as at least has been my experience, because a lot of those are self-reporting companies and they're not held to any standard to do that. That is how I would look at it, but more than anything, I'd rely on the market feel. Because the second you think, okay, we're going to be competitive with, this warehouse or that warehouse, then you find out that their benefits are far richer than yours. They pay 100% for their employee medical, and you pay 50% for employee medical. So those things are hard to compare. And I certainly shouldn't rely on Indeed or ZipRecruiter or anyone else for those sorts of things, because it's not very accurate. There aren't any really great resources, but I found that just finding out what the market will bear as you're making job offers is probably the best way to go. It means you're going to lose some candidates sometimes, and you will not be competitive sometimes, but it gives you a pretty good idea. And then asking, if you lose a candidate, ask that candidate what the wage was. Now, you might account for some fluff, but they may also be fairly accurate in what they tell you.
Yeah, great. Yeah, really good point. And I love the BLS data as well. Again, because it's maybe a little bit more trustworthy than some of the other sources out there. Well, let's keep moving then. Some great questions. Thank you for sending those in. Retain top talent as a business can be really difficult, especially when right now it's an employee's market. There's lots of jobs out there, more than there are workers. Business culture will evolve as new faces and attitudes join the team. So thoughts on retaining our top talent?
Yeah, it's the age-old question. How do you do that, especially when you're expanding and growing and there's so many new challenges and new faces that come in. I think one of the primary responsibilities of the company is to clarify to their own internal employees what the company goals are, and keep them simple. I mean, if the company goal is to increase profitability by 15%, then state it. That's what it is. Profit really is not a dirty word. It's sometimes the only word, because without profit, there's nothing that you can give to your employees anyway. So clarifying those goals around those simple, the simple information that you can share with employees. Communication of your strategies is really important, and then asking people for their real input. Does that help retain employees? Absolutely, it does. If you ask people for real input and then you do what you might refer to as ideation at all levels, we'd like to have every person in the company submit 5 ideas and put them in writing and drop them in this virtual box, and then give credit for those ideas as they come in. Of course, people will submit ideas that are crazy or that are unmanageable or whatever it may be, but they get the opportunity to input, and then apply as many ideas as you can. Even if let's say that somebody submits something that is just the seed of an idea, and then it ends up being manipulated and changed like 90%, still give that person credit for the 10% that they brought in the first place. Then professional development planning, I think, as a secondary, making sure that you're aligning company needs and professional development, is looking at those worn out processes that that you've employed in the past. And everyone, so here I'll tip my hand on this and get on a soapbox. I think performance reviews a traditional look back 12 months, see how you did, and then make commentary on it. No one wants that. The employee doesn't want that. Your management people resist it. They'll resist until the bitter end, and then all of a sudden they'll do all the reviews at the same time. So why do you do it? Look at creating a future for employees as opposed to looking at the past. So what I do, and we've worked with many clients on, is developing rather than judging. So developing skills and knowledge in every single employee, starting at the very bottom of your group. So if you have entry-level positions, you map a route. So it's not necessarily career progression, but it's mapping development. What do you need to do? What do you need to know? How do you need to get there? And how can we help you get there to develop you professionally for the next step in our organization, not somebody else's organization, but ours. So it's professional development as opposed to appraisal management. Appraisal management doesn't go well. And, you can use all the nice tools that are out there, some awesome tools, set goals, do all those sorts of things. But really, if you just focus on developing your internal staff from the ground up, the expectation grows from the ground up that everyone is going to move up. Any other thoughts on that, Colby?
Yeah, really good point. I think people, I've seen it so many times, people want to stay when they feel like the company's investing in them. They have, they know they're getting better. They know that it's going to lead to upward mobility. I'm curious, Becky, any examples you've seen of how a development plan at a company has made a huge impact?
Yeah, and I have to say that companies that start and stick to a development planning process and set aside appraisals, I haven't seen one fail yet. But one in particular that I worked with had about an average 15% employee turnover rate. So, it was your traditional, everyone was competing for their employees. They had the usual, oh, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there. They're going to give me better opportunities, or there's something better over there. The grass is greener. We switched that company to a development planning system where it was just completely, what do I need to do if my entry-level job is a delivery driver? What do I need to get to the next level position up? And what are the tools that are here for me? We switched, and within 4 years, the company had a 3% turnover rate. And that's not a fake rate. That's a real rate, 3% turnover. Imagine that, the difference between 15% and 3%. And, I don't need to tell anybody on this call what it costs to turn people over. It's huge. It's a gigantic cost. And then you lose the knowledge, even, your entry-level front desk person, you lose the knowledge that they accumulated. You start all over with somebody new. So in this case, they had their entry-level positions, fed people through those entry-level positions, and did development planning. And one of the key provisions was looking at every single person that was hired, whether they were hired inside, outside, promoted, whatever, especially the lower level positions. What would this person look like as a CEO of this company? So there was the expectation and the anticipation that everyone had potential, and not everyone made it to the CEO, by the way, but a lot of people moved up in the organization.
That's great. I love that idea. What a amazing impact. Fifth, the turnover after a few years. And I'm guessing if we go back and look at company performance, it also likely improved because they had more better trained and longer term employees. So what a great story.
Well, and since you mentioned that, Colby, I did not mention that this company grew to be the 10th largest travel management company in the U.S. during that time.
Okay.
And they were big. They were larger to start with, but they went from 240 employees to 800.
Yeah.
And very, very, very successful financially.
There's a quote I heard once, and somewhat said in jest, and so I don't know who it's attributed to, but the two managers are talking, and one says, "Well, what if we invest in them and they leave?" And the other one says, "What if we don't invest in them and they stay?" And so I love that the investment in their people, their futures, really did lead to a great impact on the company as well. That's fantastic. Becky, turning again, still in the vein of retention, can we talk a little about culture?
Yeah, absolutely. So culture is, culture everyone knows gets driven from the top, but there are things that can be done in the middle and all the way through an organization. And one of those things is mutual respect in the workplace and teaching and training and managing to that so that people understand that they must and they should and they will have mutual respect for each other in the workplace. Doing that, I mean, the way that that's done is to make it easy for people to be happy in the organization. When you have management people or supervisors who are not appropriate for managing and promoting mutual respect, it's time to do something about it. I remember a client that I worked with, they had an employee who had been around for a long time. She was very valuable. She was very good at what she did, but ultimately they finally approached me and said, we need to send her to charm school. And I said, yeah, I know she does need to go to charm school. Well, she did. She got sent to charm school. I mean, in a manner of speaking, but without that, I mean, she was one of the harshest people I've ever worked with, and the turnover around her was just incredible. She was disrespectful to people. So you want to make it easy for people to be happy, and part of that is managing managers and supervisors, also promoting and showing respect at all times, every direction, whether it come from the very top of the organization, and especially if it comes from the top of the organization. Make sure that you have a constant and consistent showing of respect, because once you've got a little group of people or an individual who isn't of that ilk and doesn't promote and show respect, everyone knows it. It becomes a sore spot for people, and they're not happy. And then Monday morning madness, I call it. What you're really looking for is, it seems crazy, but it is possible to have employees who look forward to Monday, regardless of the madness that's going on, regardless of what's going on. And the way you do that is you respect people, make it easy for them to be happy. It doesn't mean you give them everything they want. If people want double their salary or something and it's not in the cards for you to do that, well, that's not going to happen. But you strive for Monday morning madness where people are happy to join the madness on Monday morning, and they don't agonize over Monday morning. They don't get that sick feeling in the pit of their stomach. Another part of that, however, is humility, which I think is one of the primary management strategies that all companies should employ, is for the top level, from the top on down, to just demonstrate humility. And humility is different to different people. But one of the premises of humility is to recognize that it's a privilege to be a leader. So if you're a lead or a supervisor, a manager, a vice president, a senior vice president, an owner, it's privileged to be a leader. So you want to show that. Some people call it servant leadership. I just call it privilege. Once you recognize that it's a privilege, it's really something very special, and you can feel it around you. Another premise, and this is actually, I took this from one of our colleagues who's on the phone today, Rachel Voges-Kelso. She was giving an example the other day of, you go into Target and, you say, okay, I need some formula. My baby ran out. I have, my husband's at home. I need to get formula to the baby right away. And the person at Target says, well, that is down on aisle 34. So great, nice to be instructed to that you can go get your formula on aisle 34. What Rachel says is walk them to aisle 34. So instead of at Target, saying, hey, point this direction, a superior service and superior demonstration of your privilege as a leader is to walk people to their destinations and help them get to their destinations, not just tell them how to get there. One other thing that I think is really important, and that is that, especially when you're growing a company, is don't spend the profits twice. Because people worry about the company, they worry about those profits, and even though they say that the company, shouldn't profit, or the company should profit as much, they're aware of, when the profits get spent twice. And one of those things that demonstrates that, and this can be controversial, is for owners and managers to drive up in a Ferrari and erect a small shelter for their car so that it will never get a drop of rain on it. And still, wages are still a little bit flat, and bonuses aren't coming through this year. And, we're spending everything on expansion. And yet, the owner drives up in a vehicle. That doesn't mean that people can't have nice vehicles, but it does mean look at what you're doing and how those optics play out with employees, because they can be very negative, and you would never know how negative that can be. And also that, in terms of humility, does not necessarily demonstrate humility. Doesn't mean, again, that you can't drive a nice car, but it means be very, very careful about what you demonstrate.
Oh, good, great points, Becky. Really, really great points. Those optics matter. I love that. I will just say on the mutual respect, Becky had mentioned A, B, and C players. There's another category, which is a toxic A. And this is a high performer who's destructive to your culture, right? This is the person where everyone knows, like, hey, yeah, that person's really talented, but they're just a jerk. They're a nightmare to work with. And that's how you know you have a toxic A. And those can be really destructive. You might think you can't get by without them, but in my experience and looking at research on it, it's at some point, if you can't get them up into the positive A category, it's probably going to be time to move on. They'll do more damage than good.
And no charm school will help that.
Yeah, yeah. If they're not willing to reform, then they're not going to get better. Becky, as we're trying to build a team, as we're trying to again help the company grow, talked about the internal promotion.
Internal promotion is really important, as I mentioned. A strategy of development of individuals rather than old-fashioned appraisal lookbacks supports internal promotion, because that becomes your standard approach. When you look at one of those strategies is advertising all positions internally. So you give that period of time and show respect to your internal teams and look at what you know about them, in order to look at possibly you might bypass some of the responsibility or the requirements for the position, and put somebody in a position because they've already demonstrated that they have what it takes to learn and to grow in a position. So advertising all positions also makes it look like everything, and it's transparent. You're saying we have all these positions. We're going to run them internally. If we can't find internal candidates, we may go to the outside, and you may go to the outside anyway, because ultimately it's up to you to decide who you're going to promote internally. But part two of that is mapping a career progression. It doesn't have to be this huge, spreadsheet and that sort of thing, but looking at what are the jobs in the organization, how do they rank with regard to each other, and what kind of career progression could I have as an employee throughout the company. One of those things that people can take advantage of is lateral opportunities. So lateral is not bad. Lateral is a good thing, and in fact, it's a great thing for an organization when you have people who are trained in one area and they say, you know what, I'd really like to learn this other area, even though this isn't my area. I mean, I've seen so many people move from sales support to sales, or from being a floor manager to sales, or from one area to another, and really they're not necessarily upward progression, but some are lateral progressions. one of the things that we work with employers on is selling employees on staying. So every chance you get is, I think every slide we've talked about, especially the prior one, you're selling your employees on staying with you. You want them to stay. You thank them. You tell them that we're lucky to have you. And oh, by the way, what you did yesterday was amazing. We want you to stay here. I can see you down the road filling other positions that are higher level or lateral or whatever it may be. So you sell, sell, sell. So you're a marketing person. All of us are marketing people. We're marketing to our own employees. And then, as I mentioned previously, modify salary levels ahead of the storm. So if you find yourself in the position where you're going to need to add a lot of employees, modify those salary levels ahead of the storm if you can afford to do that. And I know we're getting right down to the wire here, Colby.
Yeah, one more topic then we can just hit on briefly. Some state laws we all need to be aware of.
Yeah, so we are running into state legislation for non-compete legislation. States do not like non-compete agreements, and all of these state laws are things that really need to be understood, in the context of your business and how you approach these things. So paid leave programs are proliferating all over the country. PTO requirements, cities and counties and states are having their own sick and PTO requirements, required sexual harassment training, and then the salary transparency laws that we talked about. These are just things you need to know how they relate to employment. Make sure that you don't run afoul of any of these programs, you know and understand them, and that you're able to apply them. That part of the reason to know and understand them also is that they do represent risk to you as a business. So there are hundreds of other laws that we could talk about as well, because there, as I said, all 50 states are legislating like 50 little federal governments. So you have so many risks out there. These are some of the top risks to you, your company, and to the happiness of your employees as well.
Great points, Becky. I'll just say, listen, especially if you're a multi-state employer, you have a dispersed workforce in some way, that adds a lot of complexity. It can be great for making sure you get the right talent and it really expands your talent pool. But from a compliance standpoint, you want to make sure you're aware of that. Having an employee in San Francisco is different than San Diego. There's different compliance requirements there. So make sure you're doing the research and understand how to be compliant. I don't think we had any more questions come in that haven't already been answered by our fantastic panelists. We will be sending, like I said, sending out these slides. We also have some other resources that we're going to include, particularly some Colorado and Nevada employment law changes for 2024. Great little one-sheeters that can help you stay up to date on what's new right now, and then some fantastic templates for some of the things that Becky has talked about. Again, thank you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure, and we hope to hear from you soon. If you have any questions, please reach out. Here's our contact information. But Becky, especially want to thank you for joining us and sharing some of your wisdom and experience, and hope it's really helpful for everyone who's joined us today.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Have a great day.